I'd been scrolling through Instagram, the usual algorithm-fueled mix of influencers promoting their latest products and friends posting pictures of their perfectly curated lives, when I stumbled across her profile. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Her name was Evangeline, and her feed was a morbidly beautiful collection of photographs taken inside decaying southern mansions, each picture steeped in an unsettling aura of history and decay. Evangeline's captions were cryptic, hinting at secrets hidden within the crumbling walls of the forgotten houses. These walls whisper tales of forgotten loves and unspeakable tragedies. Read 1. The air hangs heavy with the ghosts of those who lived and died here. I was captivated. There was a strange energy emanating from the photos, a darkness that both repelled and attracted me. An almost tangible sense of tragedy, of longing, hung in the air. I started to follow Evangeline, devouring her posts and reading each caption with a growing sense of intrigue. Then, one day, she posted a picture of a dilapidated mansion in New Orleans, the decaying facade draped in Spanish moss. "This one," she wrote, "holds a secret that will never be revealed." The picture was like a siren call. I'd never been to New Orleans, but the city had always held a certain mystique for me, its dark history and vibrant culture a potent mix of intrigue and allure. The thought of visiting the mansion in Evangeline's photo, of unraveling its hidden secrets, consumed me. The next thing I knew, I was booking a flight to New Orleans. I messaged Evangeline, telling her I was coming to visit. Her response was almost immediate, a single sentence that sent a shiver down my spine. "Welcome home, darling." The city lived up to its reputation. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of jasmine, the streets alive with a vibrant energy that both excited and unnerved me. I found Evangeline's address on a map and made my way to a quiet street lined with moss-draped oaks. The house stood at the end of the street, a hulking edifice swallowed by the encroaching jungle. It was even more imposing in person, its weathered brick facade a testament to decades of neglect, the windows dark and unwelcoming. As I approached the front door, I felt a sudden chill, as if a cold wind had swept through me. My breath caught in my throat, the air thickening with a cloying sweetness. When I reached for the door, I felt a tingling sensation on my fingertips, as if 1,000 tiny needles were pricking my skin. The door creaked open, revealing a shadowy interior, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay, and a hint of something else, something primal and potent, that sent a surge of adrenaline through me. I stepped inside, the weight of the house pressing down on me, as if the very walls were breathing, silently observing my every move. A woman stood in the dim light, her figure silhouetted against the flickering glow of a single candle. As she turned, the light caught her face, revealing features that were hauntingly beautiful, the sharp angles of her cheekbones softened by a hint of melancholy. Her eyes, a deep, unsettling emerald green, held a power that made my breath catch. "You've come," Evangeline said, her voice a silken whisper that seemed to slither around the room. "Welcome home, darling." The house was a labyrinth of decaying grandeur. We wandered through dusty corridors and into rooms choked with cobwebs, the air thick with the scent of forgotten memories. Evangeline led me through the house, her touch brushing against my skin like a feather, her laughter echoing in the cavernous spaces, a sound both beautiful and unsettling. We stopped in a room that had been a grand ballroom in its heyday. The wallpaper was peeling, the wooden floor cracked and uneven, but the remnants of faded grandeur lingered in the air. Evangeline sat on a tattered velvet chaise lounge, her movements languid, almost languid, as if she was moving in slow motion. "This house has seen much," she murmured, her eyes fixed on a faded tapestry that hung on the wall. "Love, laughter, and death. It has all played out within these walls." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Something about Evangeline's voice, the way she spoke of the house, the dark undertones in her every word, sent a tremor through my body. I felt a sense of danger, a growing awareness that something was wrong, deeply wrong, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. She stood up and walked towards me, her movements as graceful as a predator moving towards its prey. Her emerald eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a strange pull toward her, a magnetic force that drew me closer to her. "You are drawn to the darkness, are you not?" she purred, her voice a seductive whisper. Her hand reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek, sending a current of electricity shooting through my body. "Don't you feel it, darling? The pull of the unknown, the allure of the forbidden?" I couldn't speak. Her touch had ignited something inside me, a primal hunger that I hadn't known existed. I felt like I was drowning in her presence, lost in the intoxicating fragrance of jasmine and something else, something dark and intoxicating. "I can show you things," Evangeline whispered, her voice a melody that sent shivers down my spine. "Things you will never forget. Things that will change you forever." I was mesmerized by her, my senses overwhelmed by the intoxicating mix of her presence and the strange, seductive energy that crackled around her. The darkness that had drawn me to her was now consuming me, erasing all sense of reason. I wanted to know more, to explore the hidden depths of the darkness that she embodied. She led me to a hidden passage, a secret staircase built into the heart of the mansion. The air in the passage was thick with the scent of damp earth, a faint tremor vibrating through the stone walls. Evangeline moved with a silent grace, her footsteps muffled by the dust that coated the floor. We descended into the darkness, the only light coming from the flickering flame of a lantern that she held. The passage was narrow and damp, the walls slick with moisture. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a scent that mingled with a cloying sweetness. The passage opened into a vast, cavernous space, the air thick with the scent of blood. The walls were lined with rows of gleaming silver and iron coffins, each one sealed with a heavy padlock. The sight sent a jolt of terror through me, but the fear was quickly eclipsed by a growing sense of fascination. "This is where I rest," Evangeline said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. She moved toward a coffin at the back of the room, its surface polished to a mirror-like sheen. She pressed a hidden lever, and the lid creaked open, revealing a velvet-lined interior that seemed almost inviting. "This is for you, darling," she said, her voice soft and seductive. "A place where you can finally be yourself, where you can embrace the darkness that lives within." I was mesmerized by her gaze, by the intoxicating allure of her presence. I felt an urge to surrender, to give in to the darkness that she embodied. I wanted to be a part of her world, to experience the secrets that she held. "Are you afraid?" she asked, her voice a whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Don't be." As she leaned closer, I felt a cold prickling sensation on my skin, as if 1,000 tiny needles were piercing my flesh. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and the world around me seemed to spin. "Welcome to my world, darling," Evangeline whispered, her voice a seductive melody that sent shivers down my spine. "Welcome to the night." I looked into her eyes, the green depths swirling with a hypnotic energy that drew me in. I felt a strange, intoxicating mix of fear and excitement, a sense of anticipation that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I felt myself giving in, surrendering to the allure of the darkness that she embodied. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. Her breath was warm against my skin, and I could feel the beat of her heart, a steady, insistent rhythm that pulsed beneath her silken skin. Her lips moved against my skin, a trail of warm, tingling sensations that spread through my body. "You will know what it is to be truly alive," she whispered, her voice a siren song that echoed in my mind. "You will know what it is to be one with the night." A sharp pain shot through my neck, a sensation that was both agonizing and strangely pleasurable. I felt a rush of euphoria, a wave of energy that surged through my body, replacing the fear with an intoxicating sense of power. The darkness enveloped me, a swirling vortex that pulled me into its depths. I felt myself changing, becoming something new, something dark and powerful. I looked down at my reflection in the polished coffin lid. The blood that stained my neck pulsed like a heartbeat, a crimson stain that marked a transformation that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Welcome to the night, darling," Evangeline whispered, her voice a seductive melody that promised a lifetime of darkness and desire. "Welcome to forever." I stood there, bathed in the glow of the lantern, my body trembling with a newfound energy. My senses were heightened, the world around me sharpened, every sensation amplified. The faint scent of blood, the rustle of silk against leather, the sound of my own heartbeat, they were all intensified, a symphony of sensations that painted a vibrant picture of the darkness that now consumed me. I felt a strange, intoxicating sense of power coursing through my veins. I felt the pull of the night, the allure of the darkness, calling to me with a seductive whisper. The world had changed. I was no longer the same person. The darkness had claimed me, and I had embraced it with a heart full of desire and fear. The night was mine, and I was hers. I would forever be Evangeline's. I'll never forget the day I reconnected with my old high school crush, Sarah, on Facebook. We had lost touch after graduation, but there she was, posting about her newfound passion for witchcraft and the occult in Salem, Massachusetts. I couldn't believe it when she agreed to meet up with me. I had always had a thing for her, and now here we were, reunited after all these years. We decided to meet at a cozy little wine bar in downtown Salem. As soon as I walked in, I spotted her sitting at the bar, looking as gorgeous as ever. She had always had this magnetic quality about her, and I couldn't help but be drawn to her. We caught up on old times, sharing stories and laughing over old memories. As the night wore on, the flirtatious banter began to heat up. Sarah leaned in closer to me, her eyes sparkling with mischief. She whispered in my ear, "I have a surprise for you." Before I could even respond, she took my hand and led me out of the bar and into the dark streets of Salem. We walked for a few minutes until we came to a secluded clearing in the woods. There, in the moonlight, I saw a group of people gathered around a fire. Sarah smiled at me. "This is my coven," she said. "We're a group of witches who practice the old ways." My heart racing, I followed Sarah as she introduced me to each member of the coven. They were all so welcoming, greeting me with warm smiles and friendly handshakes. And as I looked into their eyes, I saw a depth of knowledge and power that both excited and terrified me. As the night wore on, the coven began to chant and perform rituals around the fire. Sarah took my hand and led me to the center of the circle. I felt a strange energy coursing through my veins, and I couldn't help but be drawn into the spell. But things took a turn when one of the coven members, a tall, imposing figure, revealed the dark truth about their practice. "We are not just witches," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We are vampires." I gasped as I realized the truth. Sarah's eyes glowed red in the firelight, and she bared her fangs at me. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice seductive and alluring. "We only take what we need to survive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I couldn't deny the allure of Sarah's seductive voice. She took a step towards me, her hips swaying hypnotically. I couldn't resist her, and before I knew it, I was in her embrace, my lips on hers. The coven members cheered as Sarah and I kissed, our bodies entwined in a passionate embrace. I felt the sharp pain of her fangs sinking into my neck, but I didn't care. The pleasure that coursed through my body was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I felt my consciousness begin to fade as Sarah drank from me, and I knew that I was forever changed. I would never be able to return to my old life, but I didn't care. I had found something new, something exciting and dangerous. As the sun began to rise, Sarah and I left the clearing, hand in hand. We walked back to her home, where we spent the day in bed, our bodies intertwined in a deep and passionate embrace. I knew that my life would never be the same, but I didn't care. I had found something that I never knew I needed, and I was ready to embrace it. The darkness and danger of Sarah's world called to me, and I was ready to answer that call. From that moment on, I was a part of Sarah's coven, and I would do anything to protect and serve her, even if it meant giving my life for her. For in the darkness of the night, I had found my true calling, and my true love. And I would never let go. The invitation was cryptic, to say the least. But something about it called to me, dared me to uncover its secrets. A simple post on Instagram, advertising a private party in Charleston, South Carolina on July 4th. The host was a mysterious man with no profile picture and only a handful of followers. And yet, his posts captured my attention. They were a visual feast of the historic district, showcasing the city's charm and beauty in a way I had never seen before. I knew I had to attend this party. I couldn't explain why, but I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I messaged the host, expressing my interest, and waited with bated breath for his response. To my surprise, he replied almost instantly, inviting me to the party and giving me the address of the venue. The night of the party arrived, and I made my way to Charleston's historic district. The location was a stunning mansion, steeped in history and dripping with old-world charm. The party was already in full swing when I arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The guests were a mix of young professionals, artists, and socialites, all mingling and laughing over cocktails. As I made my way through the crowd, I couldn't help but notice the host. He was a tall, dark, and handsome man, dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his muscular build. His eyes were piercing, and his smile was captivating. I felt a strange pull towards him, a desire to know more about him and his mysterious persona. I approached him, introducing myself and complimenting him on his beautiful home. He thanked me and offered me a drink. As we chatted, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. There was something off about him, something dark lurking beneath the surface. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As the night wore on, the party moved outside to the mansion's sprawling lawn. The host had arranged for a stunning fireworks display, and the sky was alight with bursts of color and light. It was a sight to behold, and the guests were in awe of the spectacle. But as I watched the fireworks, I noticed something strange. The host was nowhere to be seen. I asked one of the guests if they had seen him, but they just shrugged and said they hadn't. I felt a sudden sense of panic, a feeling that something was very wrong. I made my way back inside the mansion, determined to find the host and make sure he was okay. But as I searched the rooms, I found nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Suddenly, I heard a scream. It was coming from outside, and it was a sound of pure terror. I ran towards the sound, my heart racing with fear. As I reached the lawn, I saw a sight that will haunt me for the rest of my life. The host was standing in the middle of the lawn, surrounded by a group of people. But they weren't just any people. They were his victims, their bodies mutilated and broken. He was covered in blood, his eyes wild with madness and lust. I watched in horror as he picked up one of the bodies, sinking his teeth into the flesh and tearing it apart. He was a monster, a creature of pure evil. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Suddenly, he turned towards me, his eyes meeting mine. I felt a chill run down my spine, a feeling of pure dread. I knew that I was next. But instead of attacking me, he smiled. It was a seductive smile, full of promises of pleasure and pain. He beckoned me towards him, his gesture full of raw, unspoken desire. I hesitated for a moment, torn between fear and attraction. But in the end, my curiosity got the better of me. I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. He reached out, his hand brushing against my skin. It was a gentle touch, full of warmth and tenderness. I felt a surge of desire, my body responding to his touch in a way I couldn't control. He pulled me closer, his lips meeting mine in a passionate kiss. It was a kiss full of fire and passion, a kiss that made me forget everything else but him. But as we kissed, I couldn't ignore the sound of screaming in the background. It was a reminder of the horror that was happening around us, a reminder of the monster that he was. I pulled away, my eyes meeting his. I could see the madness in them, the desire for blood and gore. I knew that I had to get away, to escape from this nightmare. But as I turned to run, he grabbed me, his grip tight and unyielding. I struggled, trying to break free, but it was no use. He was too strong, too powerful. He dragged me back to the group of victims, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I knew what was going to happen, and I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg for mercy. But I was too afraid, too paralyzed with fear. He pushed me down, his hands ripping at my clothes, exposing my skin. I felt his teeth on my flesh, his mouth tearing at my body. It was a pain like no other, a pain that was both brutal and seductive. I closed my eyes, my mind drifting away as the pain consumed me. I could hear the sound of screaming, of fireworks bursting in the sky. It was a surreal moment, a moment that was both terrifying and exhilarating. And then, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body bruised and bandaged. I couldn't remember what had happened, only flashes of memories that seemed too surreal to be true. The doctors told me that I had been found unconscious on the lawn of a mansion, my body covered in cuts and bruises. They said that I had been the victim of a brutal attack, but they couldn't tell me who had done it or why. I knew the truth, though. I knew what had happened that night. I had been attacked by a monster, a creature of pure evil. I had been his victim, his plaything. I left Charleston the next day, unable to bear the memories of that night. I couldn't forget what had happened, couldn't erase the images of blood and gore from my mind. But even now, as I sit here and write this, I can't help but feel a strange sense of longing, a desire to go back to that night and experience it all over again. It was a night of horror and terror, but it was also a night of passion and pleasure. It was a night that I will never forget, no matter how hard I try. It was a night that changed me forever, a night that will haunt me for the rest of my life. I had never given much thought to the strangers who followed me on Instagram. I had always assumed they were just people who happened to come across my account and decided to follow me for one reason or another. But that all changed on November 5th, 2023, when a mysterious man by the name of Vincent started following me and began liking all of my photos. At first, I was flattered by the attention. Vincent was attractive, with jet black hair and piercing green eyes. He had a certain air of mystery about him, and I couldn't help but be drawn to his profile. He had very few followers and even fewer posts, but the ones he did have were dark and alluring. I found myself scrolling through them for hours, mesmerized by the shadows and the haunting beauty of his images. It wasn't long before Vincent messaged me. His words were charming and seductive, and I found myself unable to resist his advances. We messaged back and forth for hours, and before I knew it, I had agreed to meet him at a downtown bar. I walked into the dimly lit bar, my heart racing with excitement and nervousness. I scanned the crowd, looking for Vincent, and my eyes landed on him almost immediately. He was even more handsome in person, with his chiseled jawline and piercing gaze. I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine as he smiled at me. We spent the evening talking and laughing, and I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. He was charming and witty, and he had a way of making me feel like the most important person in the world. As the night went on, I found myself becoming more and more drawn to him. But as the hours passed, I began to notice something strange about Vincent. He never seemed to eat or drink anything, and when I asked him about it, he simply smiled and changed the subject. He also seemed to have an almost supernatural awareness of his surroundings, and he would often stare off into the distance with a faraway look in his eyes. As the night wore on, Vincent's demeanor began to change. He became more aggressive, and I could see a darker side of him beginning to emerge. I tried to brush it off as the alcohol talking, but deep down, I knew there was something more to it. Suddenly, Vincent's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "I've been looking for you for a long time," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're the one I've been searching for." I tried to back away, but Vincent was too fast. He grabbed me, pulling me close to him. I could feel his cold breath on my neck, and I knew in that moment that I was in danger. "You don't have to be afraid," Vincent whispered in my ear. "I can give you everything you've ever wanted. Power, wealth, immortality. All you have to do is say yes." I tried to pull away, but Vincent's grip was too strong. I could feel his fangs piercing my skin, and I knew that I was about to die. But instead of pain, I felt a wave of euphoria wash over me. Vincent's blood flowed into me, filling me with a power that I had never experienced before. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer the same person. I was stronger, faster, and more powerful than I had ever been before. I looked at Vincent, and I knew that I had made the right choice. But as I embraced my new life as a vampire, I couldn't help but wonder about the cost of immortality. Was it worth it to give up my humanity, to take the lives of others in order to survive? I looked at Vincent, and I knew that I had made the right choice. But I also knew that I would have to be careful, to keep my true nature hidden from the world. I would have to be strong, to resist the urge to give in to my darker impulses. And as I walked into the night, I knew that I would never forget the price I had paid for immortality. I would never forget the man who had shown me the true meaning of power and seduction, and the brutal consequences that came with it. I still remember the day I received that Instagram direct message from the infamous nature enthusiast and influencer, Bella Vista. It was a sunny day in May of 2023, and I was scrolling through my feed, enjoying the breathtaking views from her latest hike in the Rockies. To my surprise, she had personally invited me to join her on her next adventure. I couldn't believe it. I had admired her daring exploits and stunning landscapes for months. Without hesitation, I accepted her offer. A few days later, I arrived in Denver, Colorado, eager to meet Bella and embark on our hike together. She suggested we start early the next morning to catch the sunrise at the peak. I packed my backpack with all the necessary hiking essentials and eagerly anticipated our encounter. As I waited for Bella in the hotel lobby, I shivered with anticipation. When she finally arrived, she was even more mesmerizing in person. Her ice blue eyes pierced through me, and her pale skin shimmered in the dim light. The scent of her perfume was intoxicating. "Welcome to Colorado. I'm so glad you could join me," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. "I want to show you something truly extraordinary." An electric current seemed to pass between us as we shook hands, and I felt a strange pull towards her. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had met her before. We began our trek at the crack of dawn. Bella led the way with sure footsteps, navigating the steep, narrow trails in the dark as if she could see through the night. I struggled to keep up, a combination of nerves and excitement coursing through my veins. As we gained altitude, the landscape transformed. Towering pines and vibrant wildflowers stretched to the cloudless sky, their colors intensified by the sunrise. The beauty of the scene left me awestruck. Bella turned to me and whispered, "You see, this is why I love the outdoors. There's magic around every corner." Her breath on my neck sent a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't help but be entranced by her otherworldly allure. We continued our hike, exchanging stories and laughter along the way, building a connection beyond the bond of just two hikers. As time passed, the terrain became more rugged. Eventually, we reached a remote and isolated area. Bella stopped abruptly and suggested we take a break. "Let's rest here for a moment, take in the view," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was something oddly sensual about her suggestion, and despite the growing unease in the pit of my stomach, I couldn't resist. We sat down, and I watched as Bella gracefully unfolded a blanket, gesturing for me to join her. She handed me a thermos filled with a steaming liquid, insisting it would help warm me up. I took a cautious sip, the deceptive sweetness first lingering on my tongue before giving way to a bitter aftertaste. "So, what do you think of this place?" she asked, her eyes glinting with an unfathomable emotion. "It's breathtaking," I responded, feeling oddly faint. Bella leaned closer, her gaze softening. "There's more to this place, and to me, than what meets the eye." Before I could respond, her eyes flashed red, and I felt her fangs elongate, piercing into the flesh of her lower lip. A sense of dread washed over me, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from her. I stumbled to my feet, trying to escape, but my body felt heavy, my movements sluggish. She rose effortlessly, her movements sinuous and predatory. "What are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. "I'm a creature of the night, fueled by the essence of the living," she said, a cruel smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I realized that I had been lured here not for a friendly hike, but as sustenance for this preternatural being. In my ignorance, I had walked into a trap. My heart pounded in my chest, fear constricting my throat. I had to think fast if I was to survive. "Please don't do this. I'm not ready to die," I begged, frantically searching for a way out of this nightmare. Bella hesitated, her gaze softening. "You don't have to. I feed on the unsuspecting, but you're different. I find myself drawn to you, fascinated by your spirit. Let me go right now, and I'll leave and never tell a soul about this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Bella looked at me for what felt like an eternity, her expression inscrutable. Finally, she gave a sharp nod. "Fine, I'll let you leave," she said coldly. "But mark my words, if you speak a word of this, I will hunt you down." I didn't need to be told twice. I gathered my belongings and made my way down the treacherous path, my heart racing every time I heard the snapping of a twig or the whisper of the wind. My mind was reeling from the horrifying encounter, and the taste of fear was now forever etched into my consciousness. After hours of walking, I finally arrived at civilization. I recounted the series of events to the local authorities, but with no evidence to support my claim, they dismissed it as a delusion brought on by exhaustion. I realized that I was on my own. Bella had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the memory of our harrowing encounter. I cannot help but wonder if I would ever come face to face with the vampire again, but deep down, I knew that our paths would cross again. Perhaps one day, I would have the strength to face her and put an end to her predatory existence. But until that day came, I would always look over my shoulder, wary of the shadows and the secrets they concealed. For now, I had survived, and that was enough to keep me moving forward. I'm not sure what possessed me to follow at Sunset Siren on TikTok. Her videos, filled with the golden hues of Key West sunsets, were undeniably captivating. Each one, a fleeting masterpiece captured perfectly, felt like a stolen moment from paradise. But it was her voice, a sultry whisper against the soundtrack of crashing waves, that truly drew me in. It spoke of hidden coves, secluded beaches, and a beauty that could only be found in the dying light. Her latest video featured her silhouetted against the setting sun, a single tear rolling down her cheek as she spoke. "The summer solstice is a time of magic, a time when the veil between worlds thins. Join me on June 21st in Key West, and let's witness the beauty of the longest day together." I, a lifelong sucker for romance and an even bigger sucker for magical experiences, found myself booking a flight to Key West within the hour. The island was a blur of turquoise waters, powdery white beaches, and the intoxicating scent of salt air and coconut oil. I found myself at a tiny, ramshackle bar on the outskirts of town, the one Sunset Siren mentioned in her video. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the beach in a fiery orange glow, I spotted her. She was everything I imagined and more, ravishingly beautiful, with a cascading mane of raven hair that framed her face. Her eyes, the color of warm amber, held an unsettling intensity that made me forget my initial apprehension. "You came," she said, her voice a melodic sigh. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "I couldn't miss this," I managed, my throat suddenly dry. She smiled, her lips a perfect, crimson curve, and extended a hand towards me. "Welcome, my dear," she whispered. "The beauty of the solstice is about to unfold." That night was a feast for the senses. The air crackled with an energy I couldn't quite explain, and the sunset, though breathtaking, felt almost electric. Sunset Siren, her name now a cruel irony, led me through a labyrinth of narrow streets, our footsteps barely audible on the worn cobblestone. We reached a secluded beach, the sand soft and cool beneath our feet. The moon, a silver crescent, cast a ghostly glow on the water. "This is where I like to watch the sun fade," she said, her voice low and husky. As the final sliver of the sun disappeared, the beach seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I felt my skin tingling, a strange warmth spreading through my body. Sunset Siren turned to me, her eyes burning with a fire that mirrored the dying embers of the sun. "There is magic in this place," she breathed, her voice losing its usual melodic lilt and acquiring a sharp edge. And beauty, always beauty. Her hands reached out to touch my face, her fingertips cool against my skin. A chilling sensation spread from my skin to my core, the warmth of the sunset fading away. I was mesmerized by her beauty so intoxicating it made me forget the primal fear that was beginning to take root in the back of my mind. "You are beautiful," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. "So beautiful." I felt a surge of pleasure through me, a desire so intense it overwhelmed all logical thought. I was drawn to her, my body yearning for the warmth that I felt radiating from her. I leaned in, my lips brushing against her cheek, my breath catching in my throat. "Let me show you," she murmured, her voice a seductive whisper. She led me further down the beach, her touch sending shivers down my spine. We stopped at what seemed like an ancient, moss-covered altar. A single, flickering candle cast long shadows around us, the air thick with a cloying sweetness. "This is where the magic happens," she said, a strange smile playing on her lips. "This is where beauty is truly revealed." She unbuttoned my shirt, her fingers deft and sure. I felt a blush creeping up my neck, a confused mixture of fear and arousal coursing through me. She leaned in, a whispered promise on her lips. Then, her gaze shifted, a flicker of wild hunger in her eyes. "Don't you dare!" I gasped, the terror of her true nature finally breaking through the veil of desire. She seemed surprised, her smile faltering. "But you're beautiful," she said, her voice laced with an uncharacteristic confusion. "You're a monster," I whispered, anger rising in my chest. "No," she said, a flicker of fear momentarily clouding her eyes. "I just want to share the beauty. I want to show you what it truly means to be alive." As she spoke, two sharp fangs, like polished ivory, shot out from her mouth. The scent of blood, sweet and cloying, filled the air. Her eyes, once warm and welcoming, now blazed with a cold, predatory hunger. The fear that had been lurking in the back of my mind solidified into a terrifying reality. "I won't let you hurt me," I said, my voice tight with a mix of terror and defiance. Her smile returned, cold and cruel. "You are beautiful," she purred, her voice dripping with a sickening sweetness. "And beauty deserves to be shared." Before I could react, she lunged, her fangs finding their mark on my neck. The pain was excruciating, a searing, fiery agony that ripped through me. But it was quickly replaced by an overwhelming sense of euphoria, a strange mix of pleasure and terror that left me paralyzed. The world seemed to spin as I felt a strange, liquid warmth spreading through my veins. The air, once thick and humid, became thin and sharp, my lungs struggling to take in the oxygen. My vision blurred, the colors around me fading into a deep, rich red. "You're beautiful," she whispered, her voice echoing in the dark recesses of my mind. "So very beautiful." She pressed her lips to mine, a kiss that tasted of blood and iron, a kiss that felt like a final, agonizing embrace. And as I slipped into unconsciousness, I saw a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes, a cruel, predatory triumph that mirrored the fading light of the dying sun. The sun had long since set when I woke up, my body aching with a strange, unfamiliar longing. The beach was deserted, the only evidence of the previous night's events a faint metallic scent still clinging to the air. I looked down at my body, the mark of her fangs a crimson stain against my skin. A wave of nausea washed over me, a horrifying realization dawning in my mind. I was no longer human. The desire, the hunger, was overwhelming. I yearned for the sweet taste of blood, the intoxicating rush of power that had filled me in the moments after her bite. My reflection in the water was a distorted mockery of my former self, my eyes glowing with a crimson light that mirrored the moon overhead. My skin, once pale and youthful, was now as white as bone, my lips a dangerous, blood-red curve. I was a vampire, a predator, a creature of the night. The beauty that had drawn me to Key West had turned out to be a cruel, seductive trap. I was now one of them, a creature of the shadows, forever bound to the darkness that had consumed me. And as I looked towards the horizon, where the sun would soon rise, I knew that my life as I once knew it was over. The sunset siren had taken more than just my blood, she had taken my soul. And now, I was left with a thirst I could never quench, a beauty that was as dangerous as it was alluring. I was a creature of the night, and I was no longer human. But somewhere, in the dark recesses of my transformed mind, I still held on to the hope that one day, I might find a way to break the curse that had bound me to this eternal darkness. I looked back at the altar where the night had unfolded, the remnants of the candles still smoldering, a sinister reminder of the night's events. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized that the summer solstice wasn't over yet. There was still time for another sunset, and with it, another chance to prey on those seeking beauty. And I, the creature that she had created, the monster she had made, would become the very thing I had once feared. Sunset siren had awoken a beast within me, and the night was only just beginning.